So again, this is the Thriving in Ministry Conversations for Connection and Collaboration webinar, co-hosted by Lifelong Learning at Virginia Theological Seminary and the Thriving in Ministry Initiative at VTS. And our panelists this afternoon are the Reverend Erika Meyer and the Reverend Dr. Carol Pinkham Oak. I'm Charlotte Hand Greason, and I invite you just to take a moment to settle yourself wherever you are with your screen and put your feet firmly on the ground. Ground yourself. Sit comfortably in your seat or stand securely if you're upright, and feel yourself to be both grounded and supported. Take a few slow, deep breaths, remembering that breath is a gift from God. Breath is the life that connects us and helps us to thrive and grow deeper within our own ministries and with the assistance of others. And we share breath with all creatures on this beautiful, beautiful earth. And Catherine, if you would forward 2 slides to the reading, the scripture reading, thank you. This afternoon, we are going to start with scripture. This is Philippians 4, verses 4 through 8. Paul writes to the Philippians, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your gentleness be known to everyone. The Lord is near. Do not worry about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things." The screen shows a very brief outline of our time together today. We open with prayer and scripture. We'll have some brief introductions. We'll talk about mentoring as a concept and the concept of a structured conversation. And then Carol and Erika are going to model this conversation for us. And there'll be a break for question and answers and thoughts if you have any. And then we'll do a walkthrough of the conversation itself. Carol will lead everybody, all of the participants, in going through this structured conversation. That's our time together. Please, again, do use the chat box and the question and answer module at the bottom of your screen if you have thoughts that you want to share or if you have questions that you want the panelists to answer. And with that, we will move on. Carol, would you do a little explanation?
Sure, happy to. So many of you may be familiar with the Thriving in Ministry initiative, and 2 hallmarks of our program are one-on-one mentoring and peer mentoring. We do both in our groups that we form together, the learning groups. So it's important to even say, why do we use this method in our process of learning? And the first is for connection. If you have a connection with a conversation partner or someone with whom you are intentionally talking about your practice of ministry, that's a connection that we don't necessarily come by and fall into. It's a connection, it's a relationship that we need to set up and say we want to connect with this other person around our ministry. Hopefully it's someone who can both have a long view and a short view for you. The other is self-awareness. Self-awareness is one of our key aspects of leadership. And if you've got a connection with somebody who can be somewhat of a one-on-one mirror, then that just improves your ability to lead and your ability to function as a leader for others. And this structured conversation is a way in which we function as leaders for others. But the final and most important part is mentoring is for learning. The mentor should be learning, and the person who is the mentee or the peer learner should be learning. We intentionally don't follow the method of mentoring where there's a master that pours the information into the mentee's head. That's not what we're interested in. What we're interested in is a mutual and collaborative relationship where the mentor does have experience in the context or some perspective on the context. But the mentor is willing to learn as much from the mentee as the mentee is willing to learn from the mentor. It's a very much a two-way conversation with people who are both engaged and committed to the practice of ministry. So mentoring is an important part of understanding how you learn and grow through many years. It takes one shape in the initial years of ministry. And the beauty of mentoring is that it can change and adjust its shape for what you need to learn at whatever stage of ministry you happen to be in. So I'm glad you're here today to engage in this kind of learning conversation and have a little bit of insight into the process that we use in Thriving in Ministry.
And Erika was one of our first cohort peer learning priests. She was in the Women in Leadership, Women Expanding Leadership peer learning cohort from 2018 to 2020 in Thriving in Ministry. And Erika, I hope that you would just take a few minutes and talk about your experience of both being mentored one-on-one or mentoring within a peer cohort. If you would just take a few minutes and talk about your experience of mentoring, being mentored.
Being mentored. Well, I had the great pleasure of being mentored by Carol, and I found it a time where to have these conversations set up really helped me with a sense of support and accountability that went deeper. I mean, there was some accountability with amongst peers, but when you have a one-on-one conversation set up with someone to examine a particular issue, like you just can't hide, right? You know, it's where you're going to go there, maybe even if you feel, as I did at times, ambivalent about going there. So a deeper level of accountability, and with that, a deeper level of support, where, you know, Carol would say, okay, if you're going to do that, let's check back in 2 weeks and see where that is. So the support's there, along with that horrible word accountability. And the experience of being in a peer group, it's a lighter level of accountability, but also a sense of reassurance of being in a circle of people who really get a variety of issues I might be struggling with. And what I found in my peer group is that once there was a level of comfort established, there were certain people who just had a gift for asking me a really awkward question. And the awkward question or two in the peer group ended up being like so helpful. I just didn't know it at the time. It, you know, took me, you know, somewhere in the next week going, you know, I really need to, that's my whole sermon is that question she asked me, you know, that kind of thing. So the Holy Spirit was really moving in a lot of our interactions. And I wouldn't have even said that right in the moment, but that's how I experienced it overall.
Have you found that you had monthly peer learning community meetings that use this particular structure that we're going to delve into in just a minute. And you had monthly one-on-one mentoring. Now that you're done with that section or part of your vocational training, do you find that you use the mentoring concept in your day-to-day interactions as within your vocation, within your relationships? Has it affected the day-to-day aspects of your life?
Well, I think I have felt that the structured conversation is so useful, and it's also something that's easy to avoid. Because it does take us to a deeper level. So, I haven't, as much as I feel like it's useful to me, it's hard to make it, bring it into my own life, just because it really does require of people commitment to go there. And so I could see using it, but I actually haven't mentored anyone in particular with this, because I think it really takes a kind of a container to do mentoring kinds of interactions. That's just what I'd say.
Also, a little thing like pandemic, it's been a hot couple months. So we're going to share the screen, and this is we'll move into the part of our webinar where we're going to talk about this structured conversation, the conversation for clarity. And Carol, if you would take a few minutes and explain where it comes from and how it gets used, and then we'll move into the next part.
Great. So this comes from the work of Susan Scott and Fierce Conversations. You may have heard of Fierce Conversations. For a while, there was a handful of dioceses in the Episcopal Church that were using it and teaching it. We have adapted Susan Scott's methods and her Fierce conversation models in Thriving as a way to give a consistency and a method so that all our mentors and mentees understand, oh, this is the kind of conversation I'm having. Charlotte has listed at the end of the webinar the resource and Susan Scott's book, Fierce Conversations. I prefer to call it an incarnational conversation because you really have to bring yourself to it. Erika was saying, it was a place that you really may not prefer to go, but you need to go. It really does bring you out into the gifts and challenges that I believe we are given in order to minister to people more fully. So I like to call it incarnational conversations, where Christ is living through us and coming out through us to others. I also will say that as we're talking today, we are talking specifically about the ways in which we use it in our program. However, this model is applicable in a lot of different contexts, which we'll talk a little bit about at the end, and when I invite you to come up with some of the answers and answer some of the questions that Erika and I are going to run through in a minute. So, conversation for clarity. It is a structured conversation. It has certain steps that are designed to have the person to whom the questions are being asked go deeper and deeper into levels of clarity. It is a conversation that asks for impacts and will not take the first answer that's given, but asks to say, if that's true, then what's the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing. The participant, the mentee, let's say, is the person who really can choose how deeply they're going to go and how deeply they're going to trust in that conversation. The mentor, or the person who's asking the questions, has the conversation shape in front of them, and they stay with that shape. They don't deviate off, hopefully, into exploratory or, gosh, that was an interesting comment territory. They instead stay with the structure of the conversation, which of course creates safety because the person that you're talking to knows that you're following the shape, and safety creates trust, which enables the person in the conversation to go even deeper and get even deeper into their clarity. The end of the conversation ends with a commitment to action. So it's not just, gosh, that was really interesting to talk about that, but it's, okay, here's what I'm going to do about it. Here's when I'm going to do it. And here's when I'm going to get back to you to tell you how it went. So the end of the conversation ends with a commitment to action.
Oh, hold on, Catherine, can you back up a slide? Actually, can you just just go back to the three of us? No slides. There. So there's this structure for this conversation. I am putting it into the structure that Carol and Erika will use is now in the chat box as a URL link. You can click on it and it will open up in your browser. It is also in the slide deck at the end as a PDF. So we really want you to follow along. The questions will be also on slides, which is why I wanted to take a quick little break, show our happy smiling faces again before we go into a bunch of slides. But what this structure does is it creates space. If both mentor and mentee, if both parties are following along, you know pretty much what the next question will be. And as Erika said, you may not want to go there, but you know what the next question is. And it's very much like, in my mind, a liturgy. The liturgy creates a context and creates a structure into which we can move and have freedom to feel our feelings and to explore, and it's safe. There's a safe container, and we know that it ends. And that is, and it's very clear, you'll see at the end, that the conversation ends, but it's not finished. It does keep, there's a next part and a next part and a next part. So with that, Catherine, would you share the screen that starts with those bullet points? And Carol and Erika, I leave it up to you.
Okay. So Erika has thought about an issue that she's going to ask. And these questions, as I said, this is just a reminder, they're asked in the same way, in the same order. So we'll be, as we go through each one, we'll be slowly advancing the slides. I may need to take a shortcut just as I'm watching the time, and I'll let you know if I'm going to do that. So Erika, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So Erika, what is the most important thing we need to be talking about today?
Gee, Carol, I've been wondering, am I at my highest and best use as an associate rector instead of leading a congregation myself?
Okay, that is a very important thing for you and for your future to be thinking about, and just for your vocation. How long have you been thinking about this?
Well, I think I came to my current job with about 16 years leading small congregations, and really needed a break from that. I'd been in a long, demanding tenure in a struggling parish, and had also had some big health crises, or a big health crisis during that time. And so I was burnt out and really looking for a kind of collaborative experience where maybe I wouldn't have all the responsibilities, but where I could be helpful. So about a year, I've been doing that for about 2 years. And before the pandemic hit, maybe about 9 months ago, 10 months ago or so, what got thrown around or lifted up in my current context is that a church plant was going to open up that would be a joint project between the diocese and the parish that I work in. And even though that's on hold, I wondered, oh, is that, am I ready to go there? Or do I want to put myself forward as a candidate for that church plant? It's been something on my mind for a while, though we've all been disrupted now for a bit.
Yeah.
And that project has not gone forward, though.
Right.
I think there's still plans for it to go forward.
So you, even after 2 years of doing what you were doing, you were starting to wonder what's next.
Yeah.
Or inklings of it, perhaps. And then this particular possibility came up and you started thinking about it more. So you really, over the last year to 10 months, have been thinking about, are you really using your gifts? And are you really prepared to go on to another challenge at this stage?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Well, that's the issue that we're going to focus on, even though it's a little big, Erika. We're going to stick with that. So how is this wondering impacting you? What are some of the, as you think about these things, what is the impact that it has on you? Let's just start in your daily ministry.
I think the impact has to do with how I approach or connect with, say, a ministry, a current ministry that's just getting off the ground, and I'll think, oh, well, I should dive right in and help make this happen, and then I wonder, oh, well, what will that mean if I, am moving on in, 6 months or in the next year, So I think it's subtle, but I think it affects the way it brings up some worry or concern that will I, as I get more embedded in the parish I'm in, will I be around, or should I be around to help make this or that happen?
Okay.
So sort of levels of responsibility, maybe. How responsible do I want to be, or involved do I want to be? And
I also heard follow through and commitment. Where is some of the bandwidth for that?
Yeah.
Are there other impacts in your daily ministry?
Not really that I can think of. I mean, I can see, I know that I'll stop there.
Okay. What about impacts at home?
Well, just a general level of what are we doing? What's going to happen?
So open-ended kind of.
Yeah. Just how do we balance out various demands? I have older parents that are close by. That's a factor.
Okay.
My husband has an agenda. That's a factor,
Yep. The people that we love and care about usually are factors in our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you hear about these impacts, both the ones at work and the ministry and the ones at home, how do you feel about those immediate impacts?
I guess I feel a little guilty, maybe.
Okay.
Because I, really value being a team player and being collaborative. And then I think, oh, well, maybe I'm going to, I don't want to ditch everybody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there other feelings?
I think, one of the polarities I experienced, is that okay to talk about that? Polarity is that, coming from having been a rector into a different role has been deeply restful. Because maybe it's just me, but I tend to take on a lot of responsibility for things, or feel the weight, the burden of responsibility. And so there's this, oh, wow, this is so restful not to be in leadership. And yet I'm ambivalent because, gee, this is deeply restful, but hey, wait a minute, I'm not in charge, So there feels like there's this a trade-off of, I have a semblance of a normal life at times, and also really miss, being important and calling the shots or setting agendas or whatever.
Making decisions.
Yeah.
So there's a little guilt, there's ambivalence.
There's
a little
guilt,
bit of
ambivalence. Yeah.
Yearning. I also heard yearning for what you knew before.
Yeah, I'll be specific. I miss feeling really significant.
Yeah. Good for you, Erika. I think that's important to be able to say. It's really important to be able to say.
And yet I know with that significant, I know that the whatever I get from feeling significant, the trade-off is, again, a sense of, putting down the weight.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, if nothing happens, if nothing changes, what do you think is likely to happen for you?
I think the loss, if what would I lose out on without a change, is that I've said this to you before, is that I feel like if I'm ever going to be able to fully live out my vocation as a priest, it's now. That this is sort of my last phase of ministry. I have another 7, 8, 9 years, something like that, and to go. And the sense of loss is, gee, what might I be able to do in that time that uses all my gifts?
Yep.
Yeah.
If nothing changes, what do you think is at stake for your family?
More. I don't think anything's specifically at stake with my family. There. My husband's older, so he would like us to settle somewhere where he can think about retiring. That's not where everything costs $1 million to live in. He wants to buy something somewhere. So there's that sort of longing on his end that I'd like to support in some way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I want you to continue to think about this, Erika, and because I want to move us on, I do want you to, for yourself, after this conversation, jot down how you feel about, if nothing changes, what the impact would be, what the impact on you would be, your feelings about what the impact on your household would be. But right now, there's another question that I want to get to, because I think it's very important for us to consider this one. And it's actually one of my favorites. So if we could go to the next slide. So this question, Erika, is the one that we all don't want to answer, and it is all really important for us to answer, and it is theologically significant that we will allow ourselves to go there with another person. But what part of you has contributed to this? Where are your fingerprints? Or as Fierce Conversation says, where is your DNA on the problem?
Okay, I've actually thought about this ahead of time.
Okay.
So I have an issue, a personal issue, and it's that I am happy to stay busy with lesser things and less significant things, because the important things can seem risky, demanding, and potentially a source of failure.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that that's like, I can catch myself doing that, and have actually even talked to you about the fact that I do that. So yeah, there's a way that staying busy and being helpful and useful, but not wading into more significant ministry activity, is a way of avoiding stuff that might not work.
Right. Avoiding the risk.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make a comment here. This is one of the places where knowing the structure of the conversation is really, really helpful, because it gives the person a chance to think about it ahead of time. It also gives the person who's asking the questions to be prepared to really be connecting what they've heard with what is being said right now. And as I said, it takes a theological part of our honesty of being open and vulnerable with one another to answer this question, and it's worth coming back to if you need to. But I'm going to go on, and if you were able to come to a decision about this, Erika, that's the way I want to put it. When you decide where your gifts could be best used, what would be your ideal outcome? What would you like that to look like? What would you like to see for yourself, see for your family?
Well, I think an ideal outcome would be serving again as a rector in a place where it was right for, family circumstances. But that in seeing that, like, it's not something that has to happen tomorrow. Like, that's a kind of like, oh, that would be good to resolve these things over time. That'll be nice. And the resolution isn't doesn't need to be imminent.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I'm flagging in the back of my brain as a listener and as someone who I know is going to have a future conversation with you. Doesn't need to be imminent phrase, but that's all right. So I'm just flagging that, but I'm going to ask you right now, when you think about the results, about serving again, how do you feel?
One of the questions that I carry with me is, will I be able to manage in a new way that sense of overwhelming responsibility? Do I really want the stress of feeling responsible? Or maybe the better question is, can I learn how to manage the stress of feeling responsible better, so that it isn't so overwhelming? And that also has to do with picking the right situation. Like, it's not just about me. It's about the context of ministry, and
right.
Yeah. So can I trust myself?
Yeah. Which says you have some more reflecting to do about what really is going to be important to you and where you really do want to use your gifts. And that's fine. And you've just started to ask yourself those questions. But maybe narrowing the gap from some indefinite time in the future to I'm going to focus on some of these parts in the next 2 months might help you to really name some things that are on the top of your list rather than thinking, oh, I'll get to it.
Yeah, and I'll be specific. Like, I think what would be clarifying is to just make sure my whatchamacallit is updated.
Your church profile.
My OTM, yeah.
OTM, yep. Yeah.
So by in the next month or something, so that's I'm engaged in, because I think the OTM forces some of these questions of where do I see myself, what do I want, and then it would be ready, if there was something it's like, oh, look at that.
Well, that's a great concrete action. That's a great concrete action to complete in the next month or 2 months. When do you think you're going to start that?
Well, funny you should ask. I've lost all my credentials but went and got them back again to get back into the system. And so anticipating this conversation has put the fear of God in me, and I've already contacted OTM. So
good for you. All right. All right.
I know how the game is played.
Okay. You've been through this conversation enough times that you knew I was going to ask you.
Yes, my heart is beating very fast.
So when you do your first draft, when will you follow up with me?
Well, Carol, why don't we set a time to visit, say in a month, and
okay,
I'll bet you I could do it by then.
Okay, great. Then I'll be looking for the first draft by then.
Okay.
Thank you, Erika.
You're welcome.
Thank you, you two. I know, Erika, that it feels uncomfy to be in that place, and I thank all of our participants for hanging in there, and I hope you all got to see, as we followed along, how those questions get asked and how they get answered. And I had a question, Carol, and maybe Erika, you might also have a response to this, but if the mentee, if the person answering the questions doesn't have an answer or a response to where their DNA is on the question, which I think is question 3 or question 4. No, it's not. It's question 5.
5. Yeah.
How have you contributed to this problem or this issue or this question? If the mentee can't answer that, doesn't have a ready response, how do you move into eliciting that response from them? And I would assume that there's some silence.
There's two approaches, and they can be combined. And this is part of the art and not the science of following the pattern. The one is just to allow some silence, even to allow some prayerful silence. And to me, that's one of the benefits of doing this as part of a faith community or a part of a faithful exercise with one another. Probably in a business setting, you wouldn't say to the person, well, let's just take 2 minutes and sit and pray and be silent. That's an approach that can be combined with a question that says, well, if you did know, what would it be? So essentially, you're asking the person to take a further step out, maybe making it a little safer. And if you did know what your DNA was on this, what would it be? And then they're not really committing deep down to a deep answer, but they are committing to something that has probably occurred to them in their brain, and they're not quite sure whether they're going to say it or not. And in another way is, well, you've gone as far as you could with that, and you agree to to circle back. Part of the leader's responsibility is to have this conversation with people. And so when you're listening, you're also flagging in the back of your brain, what are some places that would be fruitful to bring up again? And if the person doesn't know where their DNA is on an issue, and we all have DNA on issues, it might be glaring, it might be small, but if they don't know, then you're flagging that you're going to come back and bring it up with them again. So,
Erika, have you ever been stymied by that particular question? That what's your DNA? Where's your?
I'm probably over into like my problems, like my DNA. Oh yeah, I've got so much, so like, and I actually have the opposite problem. I need to back away and not always see everything as, I kind of over catalog my stuff.
I like that you'll note, participants, you will note in the slides, under each of the questions and in the downloadable document, that there are, for each of the questions that's asked, there are multiple ways of asking that question. And many of them include other people other than the person who is answering the questions. So how might you, what's the one for the last question is, how can you reframe the issue so that others can participate in the resolution? There's always, we're
Right.
always doing ministry with other people, and we're always interacting with other people. So you're never alone. And that can either be a feeling of, oh, I'm taking all the responsibility for myself and it needs to be shared. And also a way of asking for support and asking for help. Not asking for help, but asking for contributions as you solve whatever this issue is.
Yeah, I think for me, having Carol to talk to actually was a corrective to, and my peer group, a corrective to over cataloging. Oh, this must be something that's wrong with me or something I'm not getting. And it's like, no, why don't you look at your, look at a bigger perspective, or, they would help balance that out.
It is 10 till 4. It's actually 12 till 4. So what we had originally planned to do was to walk through with our participants, asking each of these questions and allowing you at home or at work with your own individual screens to write down some responses. I don't think we quite have time to do that, but I also don't see any questions in the question box. If you have questions, please post them. We'd be happy to help field any questions that you have about mentoring, about contextual mentoring, about this conversation. Carol.
So if I can make a suggestion for someone who wants to do an application of this for themselves, you can imagine yourself as the person being asked the questions, and the piece of paper being the question asker, right? So the paper is asking you, what is the most important thing we need to be talking about today? And you are the active participant jotting that down. And it is important for you to allow yourself to really get as clear as you can, because the paper, of course, is not going to push back. But I would really encourage you to do the current impacts, the future impacts, your feelings, and then question number 5, where is your DNA? Because that will give you a feel for the process. So then if you have a situation in your ministries where you either want to invite somebody to walk through these questions with you, or you want to have a conversation with somebody where it's, this is a really important issue that I've been thinking about, and here are the impacts that I see. What are the impacts that you see? You at least have a feel of how that flow is going to go. I love to cook, and so I tend to follow famous chefs. So Patrick O'Connell of the Inn at Little Washington has said that every time he gets a new recipe, he cooks it the same way 3 times before he makes any adaptations, because he knows it's going to come out a little bit differently each time he makes it. So I apply that advice to this conversation. I would try this 3 times. Either get someone to do it with you, or just let the paper do be your person, and then you get a feel for it. So then when you do use it with somebody else, you know your comfort levels there, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So yeah.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, do it 3 times. Really get solid with how it works. There's 2 questions, and I think that they both would be great to be answered. Keith wrote in the chat box, how well do conversation partners need to know one another?
That's a good question. And in Erika and my case, we did not know one another long at all. We were, she's part of this peer learning community, and I knew what she had shared with the rest of the peer group. We did not know personally one another long at all. Developing a trust factor is always important. I would never suggest doing a mentoring relationship or this kind of conversation with somebody that you did not already have some kind of trust foundation with, or knew that relationship was going to build or be nurtured over the future. So I hope that answers it.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to reiterate that last little piece that Carol just said, that you don't necessarily need to know the person. That's why you open with this question, what's the most important thing we need to talk about today? But you do need to have a sense of trust, and that you're not gonna, that this conversation will be held in confidentiality. So there's another question in the chat box, but before we get to that, there's one in the question and answer box that says, could an appropriate response to number 5, to where is your DNA, be, I've prayed about the issue?
That's an appropriate response. It doesn't help the person to really articulate out loud to another person where they see their own personal involvement. And again, this goes back as to our self-awareness as leaders. We need to be able to say out loud where our strengths are and where we're great. And, maybe that wasn't such the best way to do it, and I can do it differently next time. But prayed about it might be the first response you get, and I would circle back.
So there's 2 more questions. One goes back to circling back, so I'm going to hold on to that for a second. The other one in the question and answer box is, do you use this format every time you meet as mentor and mentee?
Basically, yes.
Thank you.
Basically, yes.
That was a quick and easy answer.
Yeah. And so, because
it was being used all the time. So like going back, I just thought Carol was really, really wise. And now I'm like, oh, well, she got this thing she was using. So, but anyway, I didn't totally catch on, till later.
Yeah, and there's enough different types of questions within each of the big categories that you can ask different questions.
Right.
But yes, the template is used each and every time. So Dawn asks, what suggestions for the mentee might assist in clarifying the scope of a large issue that might otherwise seem like trying to hug a mud puddle?
Love it. Well,
how do you drill down?
One thing that we didn't do, because Erika was pretty clear on what she was talking about, is repeating back to the person, this is what I hear you saying. And I know we've all done this in our conversations with people, but getting clear on the issue that you're talking about the same thing as the mentee is talking about is really important. So it's to get as clear as you can by repeating back what you're understanding they're saying. And they could lay out 3 issues. And then it is the mentor's responsibility to say, well, this is the one that you seem to be coming back to the most. Is it okay if we focus on this and we can always get to those 2 or 3 or 4 other things another time? So the mentor has to make some kind of judgment once some clarity is gained. For example, somebody started saying, oh, well, I want to talk about the pandemic. Well, that's kind of big. So we had to get it down to what specific part of the pandemic in their ministry. And of course, it raised 10 other issues, but we could only pick 1 out of them.
Thank you. And Anne then asked again about the template being shared with the mentee, and I responded in the chat box, and I'll just say, when Erika and Carol were in their cohort, the template was not shared, and we have shifted a little bit, and it's now shared with everybody, and it's shared with both our experienced priest peer learning cohort and our new priest one-on-one mentoring. We are using it for both new priests and experienced priests, and one-on-one mentoring and peer mentoring. So we'll see how it goes. As I said, I like having the template in front of me. I like knowing where I'm going. I think it provides a level of security that even if you have to answer tough questions, you know that the next one will be there. I really want to thank, we're just at our time. I want to thank you all so much. Our participants out there in Zoom land, and Carol on Long Island, and Erika in Brooklyn, and I am in Alexandria. And I thank you all so much. This has been a wonderful hour. It's sped by. If you have questions about mentoring, about peer mentoring or one-on-one mentoring, you are welcome to contact us at thriving@bts.edu, and that will be in our slide deck that gets mailed out to you. And I invite you all to go in peace, to love and serve the Lord. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, everybody, for coming.